For the longest time, I've been fascinated with all things nuclear, radiation, the nuclear symbol, the way that the sun powers itself with nuclear fission and fusion, and Sieverts, which is a measurement of radiation exposure, millisieverts, and all of that, on and on, Chernobyl, and anything that has to do with nuclear. I've always had some fascination with that. In fact, even on my phone, I have an Android phone. I even have a wallpaper that is the nuclear symbol, and it actually glows. It animates as it kind of fades in and out with the nuclear symbol, which is lime green, of course, because it has to be. Even though technically the nuclear symbol, the official one, is yellow and not lime green, but toxic waste and the green sludge, which doesn't really occur in real life, at least not that I've found. But anyway, so I came across this story of this Japanese man, which he was exposed to an insane amount of radiation back in the late 90s. His name was Hisashi Ouchi, and he was a Japanese nuclear worker who became known for suffering the worst radiation burns in history after an accident at a nuclear fuel processing plant in Japan. And that happened in 1999. So before I jump into that, I wanted to look up to see if one sievert is deadly. I always hear about millisieverts and microsieverts, but what about a full sievert? Because a millisievert, of course, is 1/1000th of one sievert. So, yes, one dose of one single sievert, it can be deadly, but a single dose of one sievert can cause acute radiation sickness, which includes symptoms such as nausea, vomiting, and hemorrhaging. However, a dose of 10 sieverts is typically fatal. Additionally, a dose of 5 sieverts would kill about half of those exposed to it within 1 month, a single month. The dose that results in death for 50% of those who receive it is 400 rem, which is 4,000 millisieverts. So I have a list of different exposures to radiation, and this is measured in millisieverts. So the cosmic ray dose rate on commercial flights, it varies from 1 to 10. I'm assuming that's microsieverts. I'm honestly not familiar with with that. I'm never been too good with math and applied sciences specifically, but it depends on the altitude, the position, and the solar sunspot phase, and that is 0.001 millisieverts. So it is such a crazy tiny amount of radiation exposure that you get in that circumstance. But this is a long list, man. There's a lot. So an abdominal X-ray is 1.2 millisieverts. So roughly 1/1000th of a sievert. So it's a very low dose. The USA average dose from all natural sources is about 3 millisieverts. So let me just start scrolling down. So now we're getting into the hundreds. Let's see. Exposure, long duration in the Ural Mountains, which is in Russia. The lower limit, lower cancer mortality rate. And let me see here. Unshielded and interplanetary space, that would range between 400 and 900 millisieverts. So almost getting close to one sievert. So around one sievert is the level reported during Fukushima 1 nuclear accidents in the immediate vicinity of the reactor. So it's a high dose. And as we read a little bit ago, one sievert can be deadly, or it could cause cancer in a relatively short amount of time. But being exposed to 10 sieverts, is that what it was? 10 sieverts? Let's see here. Yeah, I think it was. Here we go. 10 sieverts is typically fatal. A dose of 5. Okay, that's what I was looking for. 5 sieverts would kill about half of those expected, or those exposed to it within a month. So now we're getting into that range right here with 5,000. Let's see here, 5 to 10,000 millisieverts. Most commercial electronics can survive this radiation level. That's interesting. So yeah, our electronics, they can actually withstand more radiation than the human body can, apparently. Interplanetary exposure to solar particle event and SPE of October of 1989 was 20,000 or 20 sieverts. Let's see here. Now, getting down here to the crazy amounts, let's see, the Russian experimenter on June 17th, 1997. That's 48 sieverts. Let's see here. Radiation dose. Roughly calculated from the estimated 10,000 rad dose for fatality at the United Nuclear Fuels Recovery Plant on July 24th, 1964. I'm not familiar with that. I may have to look that up. That sounds interesting. So let's see here. A microbe extremely resistant to radiation. Isn't that little... Oh, no, never mind. Never mind. It is a gram-negative archaeon extremophile and the most radiation-resistant organism known to exist. Holy cow, that's amazing. It can withstand 30,000 sieverts. That's amazing. So that thing, I mean, I don't know if it would be able to survive in space, being out in a vacuum without, oxygen and all that. But, that aside, it sounds like it could survive perfectly fine out there. But anyway, I am definitely going to look up this big one. Look at this enormous number, 70, 100,000 million billion. So 70 billion millisieverts, which would be 70 million sieverts. That's the estimated dose rate for the inner wall of ITER, or ITER, with an approximate weighting factor of 10. So the ITER, it's an international nuclear fusion research and engineering mega project aimed at creating energy through a fusion process similar to that of the sun. It is being built next to the Cadarache facility in southern France. Upon completion of the main reactor and first plasma, originally planned for 2033 to 2034. So it's essentially, from what I understand, it's like a super ultra mega nuclear reactor, apparently, something like that. But I know that they're doing it for experimentation purposes, but also in hopes of generating electricity with it. But yeah, but anyway, I mean, obviously this list, it's just too long to go through, item by item. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting points here that it brings up as far as radiation exposure and different situations and different points in history and things like that. So that moves me on to the case of Hisashi Ouchi, and there's quite a few videos on this actually, and they all actually have a pretty substantial number of views. I'm actually surprised that I just heard about this not long ago. It was probably about a year ago when I first heard about this individual, and oh my God, man, it is tragic. It was a horrifying accident. Just, it wasn't working in the greatest of circumstances. He was just mixing, a chemical reaction, and it went really bad, and he got exposed to an unbelievable amount of radiation, which is, I mean, if you saw the HBO miniseries Chernobyl, and you see what those firefighters went through and how they just literally melted from the inside out, and just the way they explained it, if you're exposed to a high dose of radiation similar to what he went through, as well as people that were in Chernobyl immediately when that happened, their veins start melting, and it gets to the point where they can't even administer morphine or opiates or opioids to combat the pain that they're going through, because their veins just collapse. They just keep collapsing every time they try to put an IV in, and it just eventually becomes impossible to really alleviate their pain while they're still alive. It's horrific, man. It's bad. But anyway, I was gonna go with this one because it's not too long. It's 21 minutes long. So, and I have seen that one before. I also saw this one, which was also incredible. But it's over an hour and a half long. But I would still definitely recommend this. But either way, I'm gonna go through this one and see if we can check this out and learn this guy's story and what he had to go through, the hell that he endured. This is on Peaked Interest YouTube channel. You go subscribe to him. 200,000 likes. That is a lot.
My dad would tell me not to worry about making mistakes, because mistakes are an opportunity to improve. You take the experience, analyze it,
that's good
and
advice.
then move on and apply what you've learned. But some mistakes,
generally speaking,
are so devastating and destructive that there's no coming back.
Oh man, yikes.
No learning.
Holy cow.
And no correcting. We can only look on in horror as everything slowly disintegrates. In 1999, Japanese nuclear worker Hisashi Ouchi and his colleagues made a mistake while working at the nuclear fuel conversion company in Tokai. That mistake would lead to Ouchi being bedridden and unable to move for 83 days, where he would endure a
83
sickening
days.
series of increasingly more painful injuries and illnesses, which would cause his body to slowly
Yeah, and also, I don't know if he'll get into it, but they even did experimental, I believe it was stem cell applied research on stem cells that they were working on. They actually took stem cells and they injected it into a couple of his organs, and it was actually showing signs of improvement miraculously. They were trying some of the most experimental versions of medicine that they had available at the time in 1999, trying to keep this man alive, and they managed to keep him alive against all odds for over 80 days, which is absolutely incredible. But the advancements in medicine that they were able to essentially achieve in order to try to keep him alive and see if they can somehow get him to recover was, I mean, kind of phenomenal, to be honest. I mean, but at what cost, man? At his horrific death in almost every imaginable way.
Compose while he was still alive, leaving him in a constant state of searing pain and suffering. This is his story.
Let's go. Lee Barron. Epidemic sound. Mixing it in a bucket. That's what he was mixing up that radioactive material with. They're showing basically the animation of what he was doing when he got exposed to that radiation, that big flash of blue. That's what happened when, what was it, ionizing radiation or something like that. I don't know, man. I'm an idiot. I don't even know. I just know it created this blue flash. Most radioactive man in history. Don't watch if you're a weakling. That's the gist of that message.
On the morning of the 30th of September, 3 Japanese nuclear technicians named Hisashi Ouchi, Yutaka Yokokawa, and Masato Shinohara arrived at the JCO nuclear fuel conversion facility in Tokaimura for their day's work. The JCO plant wasn't a power generating facility, but rather one which created the fuel rods for other power plants. They did this by a process of converting uranium hexafluoride into uranium dioxide. This would be the Tokaimura plant's first batch of fuel in 3 years. As such, there were no dedicated trained staff for this role, and whichever technicians happened to be available at the time fulfilled this role.
Those are fuel rods, aren't they?
The approved procedure
like in the core of a power plant
is that the uranium powder is dissolved in nitric acid in the dissolution tank. This pure mixture is then pumped into a much taller storage tank called a buffer tank. It would then be slowly transferred into a wide tank called a precipitation tank, where it could be mechanically stirred. The design of the buffer tank prevented the fuel from going critical because of its tall cylindrical shape and the fact that the mixture wasn't properly mixed yet. The purpose of this design was to control the flow of mixture into the larger precipitation tank to prevent the mixture from going critical as it was stirred mechanically.
It's just crazy they were doing that out in the open like that.
The powder for this process was 5%.
All right.
3 years prior to this date, the JCO company had modified the official procedure so that the uranyl nitrate solution could be made in stainless steel buckets by hand.
However, the company's work procedure was modified 3 years earlier without permission from the regulatory authorities to allow uranium oxide to be dissolved in stainless steel buckets rather than the dissolution tank. So that's a no-no.
Rather than placing the ingredients into the dissolution tank.
Not good.
This was illegal and against government regulations.
Oh, great.
But had never led to any accidents due to the low concentration of uranium which was used. When the 3 workers arrived that day, the plant was already 2 days behind schedule for delivery of the nuclear fuel rods. The company put pressure on staff to complete the procedure as quick as possible, and so the technicians modified the procedure even further.
Yeah, we're mixing radioactive material. Let's get a move on it.
And pouring it directly into the large precipitation
Probably
tank.
Something that shouldn't be said in a facility like this.
Concentration much higher than anyone previously had in order to create the fuel as fast as possible. At around 10:35 a.m., after the precipitation tank reached 40 litres of highly concentrated uranyl nitrate solution, the radiation alarm sounded. And the 3 workers reported seeing a blue flash.
Yeah, blue flash.
Cherenkov radiation signaled that the mixture was generating enough heat to start a self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction and sent out blasts of gamma and neutron radiation.
Oh man.
Ouchi absorbed the highest dose of radiation as he had his body pressed against the tank to assist in pouring. While Shinohara was standing on a platform pouring the liquid into the tank, Yokokawa was sitting at a desk a few feet away and received the smallest dose of radiation.
Alright.
The internationally acknowledged radiation safety limit per person per year is 20 millisieverts. The dose considered to be fatal is 5,000 millisieverts.
Yeah, there we go. Yep, we learned that.
Ouchi received 17,000 millisieverts of radiation, 3 times the amount considered lethal. Shinohara received 10,000 and Yokokawa 3,000.
Oof. That's wild, man. He was only a few feet away and he only got a fraction of the amount.
Felt waves of pain and nausea, and both struggled to breathe. And the 3 men fled to a nearby changing room where Ouchi vomited and passed out.
Whoa.
The 3 men were sent to the hospital with the 2 most irradiated, Ouchi and Shinohara, quickly transferred to the University of Tokyo Hospital, as it had more modern facilities, more qualified staff, and cutting-edge procedures and treatments.
I mean, just working with that nuclear material, I mean, they had to have known as soon as they saw that blue flash, like how screwed they were. I mean, I would imagine, right? I would think.
Ouchi. They couldn't believe that he'd received
just having that on your conscience, just even in the hours after that happened, would just be a nightmare.
そのまま個室にいつものようにストレッチャーで普通の入院患者さんみたいに入ってきて、
Yeah, but dude, he's highly radioactive.
1日で一気に日焼けをしちゃったぐらいの赤さを帯びてて、手がすごい腫れてて、でそっちが痛いっていうふうに言ってて。
He was also alert, talkative, and friendly. One of the nurses commented that she thought that he might be able to go home that day.
Huh. He wasn't going home.
It wasn't until the test results came back that the real problem was revealed. The human body is maintained by a function of many different cell types being shed or excreted, and then replaced by a new cell. Our chromosomes contain the instructions for the replication of all cell types. These instructions are incredibly important. The cell replication is impossible without them.
Of course.
When the doctors examined Ouchi's test results, they understood the size and magnitude of the problem. Normal chromosomes can be arranged and identified quite easily, but Ouchi's chromosomes had been decimated by radiation, leaving them unorganized, malformed, mutated, and in some cases fused. The radiation had literally ripped apart his DNA and scrambled it to the point where the cell instructions were no longer usable inside his body.
Oh wow, man.
While
so
his
the
body
cells
could
couldn't
no longer
regenerate
create new cells, it did still have a supply of cells which had been created before the radiation had destroyed his chromosomes. This explained why his outward appearance looked healthy. When that supply of cells ran out, Ouchi's real nightmare would begin.
Oh man. Just instantly ripped apart his DNA.
Cell count plummeted to 10% of what is considered normal and healthy, making him very vulnerable to viral and bacterial infections. To prevent this, he was moved into a sterile room. Dr. Mayakawa was the doctor in charge of the team who would attempt to save Ouchi's life. Their first priority was Ouchi's inability to generate new cells. Without this, saving Ouchi's life would be impossible. After some discussion, Dr. Mayakawa suggested that the best course of action would be to try an experimental new procedure called peripheral blood stem cell transplantation.
Yeah, that's what it's called.
This is a procedure in which the healthy stem cells are harvested from a donor and then administered intravenously into the patient. The cells then migrate to the bone marrow and override the damaged ones, enabling the bone marrow to begin creating healthy cells again. The only issue was the donor would need to be a good match for Ouchi, and so they began testing potential donors. Luckily for Ouchi, His sister was a perfect match, and so healthy cells were harvested from her and administered to him through an IV.
I mean, wouldn't he have to get that for the rest of his life?
Before the team would know
I mean, if that were to 100% work?
Knowing that the chances of success were slim, and the family were likely to cling to any faint hopes, Dr. Maekawa allowed the family to see Ouchi on a daily basis in the hope that seeing his rapid decline would help them to accept the reality of what was happening.
Oh, yeah. I thought it'd be like good moral support too.
決して綺麗事ではなくてですね、やっぱり、そのすごい放射線による障害ですので、見た目にもやっぱり大きな変化が起こりますから、それはそれなりに真実として受け入れていただくように、毎日毎日見ていただいてましたけどね。
Ouchi seemed either in a state of denial or obliviousness about his condition, as he asked the nurse.
I mean, I don't see how though, because dude worked in a nuclear facility. I mean, you'd think that he had to have an educational background on I don't know, nuclear physics or something. I mean, I would just think that you would just have just the knowledge of what just happened, especially with that blue flash, like what that really means. But maybe he really didn't.
Is there a risk of contracting leukemia or something? Demonstrating that he didn't understand that it was unlikely he would live long enough for leukemia to kill him if he did contract it. Over the next few days, Ouchi would deteriorate as his skin cell stores were quickly exhausted.
Damn.
As his skin lost its elasticity and solidity, it began to fall off, and staff noticed that whenever they removed medical tape, it would also peel thick pieces of skin away from Ouchi's body.
Oh, man.
The doctor then stopped any further use of medical tape against his skin. At times, Ouchi would struggle to breathe, as fluid started to build up on his lungs. The team considered putting him on a respirator, but after seeing him tell his wife how much he loved her, they decided to wait and allow them both time to speak for a little longer.
God, man, that's heartbreaking.
多分その頃はすごいいろいろ体のだるさとかが出てきて、お話しするのも多分それこそ、お話しするのもこう力がいるっていうか、そういう感じだったと思うんですね。それでもなんかこうちょっと優しい口調で少し笑いながら奥さんに愛してるよとおっしゃってて、でもそういうのがやっぱり伝わってくると私たちは辛いですよね。
It would, however, be very short-lived, as the next day, Ouchi could no longer breathe, and he was intubated and given respiratory assistance.
That sucks.
While nobody knew for sure what would happen to Ouchi, the staff understood that he was unlikely to survive, and he was very likely to deteriorate. The family visited every day, and each day they would fold a paper crane. They wanted to put a crane by his bedside, but the risk of infection was too great.
Damn, man. Interesting. I didn't know that. I knew paper cranes were a big thing in Japan.
10 days after Ouchi was given his sister's stem cells, the test results came back.
Yeah, it showed improvement.
Dr. Maekawa called a meeting to discuss the results. Everyone was hoping to see his sister's chromosomes living inside his blood cells. As they peered into the microscope at his blood cells, they saw 2 red dots, which signified that the sister cells were alive and healthy.
What? Nice, man.
Ouchi was the first person in the entire world to receive this treatment, and it had worked. Over the next few days, his white cell count would continue to increase to normal levels, and the risk of infection dropped significantly.
Especially with all that radiation in him, too.
A week later, and Ouchi's skin began to deteriorate again, and an endoscope of Ouchi's intestines confirmed Dr. Maekawa's worst fear. Ouchi's mucous membranes had turned white and drooped down, signaling that they had died. The mucous membranes are responsible for absorbing nutrients and fluids from the food we eat. This meant that Ouchi would not be able to retain water and nutrients. By this point, Ouchi had become hostile towards the staff and said that he just wanted to go home.
Dude, you can't go home, man.
In an attempt to
Yeah,
get
he really
answers, the
didn't know
team
what was
examined
going on.
Ouchi's blood again. This time, instead of seeing the healthy cells they saw before, they saw mutated cells that had been corrupted by the radiation inside Ouchi's body. Ouchi's body had absorbed so much radiation when he was exposed that it had damaged the transplanted cells from his sister, even though there was no radiation.
That's what I was
source
wondering.
anymore. The medical team and Ouchi's family were devastated. Shortly after, Ouchi began to experience gastrointestinal pain and discomfort as his body excreted 3 liters of diarrhea every day.
Oh my god,
After 3
dude.
weeks, his intestines began to bleed from the wound where the mucous membrane had died and peeled away. It quickly became necessary to give Ouchi blood transfusions. On some days, he was given 10 transfusions in a single day.
Whew.
The team tried a variety of drugs to help improve some of the symptoms, but none would stay in his system long enough because of the diarrhea and bleeding. Ouchi was then transferred to a specialist bed for the critically ill, a bed which tilts to improve systemic circulation and to prevent bed sores from building up on his skin.
Huh. Never heard of those. Uh-oh. Skin grafts. Oh, man.
Once
It's
Ouchi's
gonna be
skin
rough.
had fallen off, he started to lose fluids rapidly. He lost approximately 10 litres of body fluids every day, which had to be
Good
replaced with
grief,
IV
man.
fluids. In an effort to try and retain what little layers of
Is that
skin
like
Ouchi
3
had
gallons or
left, medical
something?
staff wrapped almost his entire body in medical gauze, hoping that this would keep the skin in place and help him to retain fluids. But it didn't help. His weeping and bleeding skin would exudate profusely, and the bandages would be completely soaked in blood and fluids in just a few hours.
Whoa.
もう毎日毎日染み出しがすごくって、もう本当に半日かかるぐらいなんですね。午前中いっぱいとか、もうたくさんの先生に囲まれて皮膚の処置をするんですけど、もうそれがすごくやっぱり痛いみたいで。
Oh, I'm sure he did.
もうその時は完全に薬をたくさん使って眠らせるようにはするんですけど、見てるだけですごく痛々しいかったですね。
Because his eyelids had mostly fallen off, Ouchi's eye would get dry and bleed. And due to the level of pain that he was in, he was given large doses of narcotics to help him sleep and ease the pain.
I mean, why show that if you can't show it?
Dr. Miyakawa spoke with Ouchi's family to advise that he was very unlikely to improve, and that he could get worse still. The family asked him to do all that he could to save Ouchi's life, but the only thing that he had left to try was massive skin grafts from lab-cultured skin. Dr. Miyakawa hoped that if the skin took, then it would help keep the fluids and buy them time to find other ways to help him. Unfortunately, due to the sheer volume of fluids lost through the exposed areas of his body, the skin grafts wouldn't adhere and they quickly fell off.
Oh, yeah.
助かる見込みが非常に低いということが、客観的に誰の目にも明らかだ、ただし誰もあまりそれは公に口には出しませんでしたけど、でもやはりみんな誰しもがそう感じてたと思います。ただそれを誰かが言い出すと、全体のその指揮といいますか、
Cardiac arrest.
It had now been 2 months since Ouchi had first been admitted. He had undergone repeated
it's
blood
miraculous even
transfusions,
lasted that
skin
long.
grafts. He'd been given stem cell transplants. He was breathing through the use of a mechanical respirator. His skin had rotted away. His eyes couldn't close even when he slept because he had no eyelids. He was bleeding from his intestines and he was in searing pain at all times. But he was alive. The massive blood loss and repeated transfusions was having a secondary effect. Ouchi's heart was pumping at over 120 beats per minute, the same rate as if he was running a marathon. The stress on his cardiac muscle was immense. And then, it stopped. Due to the lack of a do not resuscitate order, the medical team were legally bound to do their best to bring him back to life again.
Oh, okay.
And so they quickly performed cardiac massage. His heart started beating again, but then promptly stopped. The team administered cardiotonic drugs to his system, and after stopping and starting 3 times, it returned to a steady, yet very fast beat. The stopping and restarting of his heart had a negative effect on Ouchi's brain and kidneys. Function was beginning to decline. When Ouchi's family called to him, he no longer had any response, and he was entirely dependent on medical equipment for survival. While Ouchi's family had not yet given up, his body was telling a different story. Ouchi's immune cells had become abnormal and were attacking what healthy white blood cells he had left. In a short space of time, he had no white blood cells at all. Even a common cold
catch a break.
could kill him in a matter of hours.
Matter of hours. Acceptance.
On the 81st night after Ouchi was admitted, Dr. Mayakawa gathered the family members in a visiting room and advised them that Hisashi Ouchi could not be saved.
Yeah, the end of the road, man.
Should his heart stop again, he shouldn't be revived. The family agreed and signed a do not resuscitate order in the hopes of sparing Ouchi any more pain.
Oh yeah.
On day 83, Ouchi's wife and son visited him for the last time. The medical staff removed the gauze from his face so that they could look at him for one more time. And then, on the 83rd night of Hisashi Ouchi's brutal battle for life, his heart stopped and he passed away.
Yeah, there's only so much you can do.
It's very easy to think of Hisashi Ouchi as suffering for far longer than he had to for no reason. Some people on the internet suggested that the doctors kept him alive against his will so they could test experimental treatments on him, that he begged to die. Some people referenced this photo in their articles and videos. None of that is true, and that photograph is from a medical textbook about burns victims. The truth is, the medical staff used every tool in medicine to try and save Ouchi's life at the request of his family. The truth is, one simple mistake was the difference between a normal day at work and the most agonizing death imaginable.
Yeah, man. Ain't that the truth? That's why safety is everything, man. It's extremely important. And yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm kind of wondering how, like, what kind of compensation the family must have gotten. I mean, surely they got something for that because, I mean, dude, just the amount of agonizing pain that he went through for that amount of time is just unimaginable. And he had, what was it? He had 17 Sieverts, wasn't it? I think that's what they said, that he experienced roughly around that amount. Yeah, I see. Here we go. I think it was around here. 20 million, or yeah, 20
millisieverts.
Yeah, he did. He got 17,000 millisieverts. So yeah, he got over 3 times the amount. He got like 3.5 times the amount of a lethal dose, or what's considered to be a lethal dose. And yeah, I mean, yeah, just to imagine that would be, I mean, I don't know. It's a death sentence. I mean, if you end up with that amount, I mean, you know, what do you do? I mean, you essentially have, like, I don't know, like 1 day left where you can at least appear relatively normal. But I mean, they said that just minutes after that occurred, he almost immediately started vomiting and he started feeling sick right away. And then he showed up in the hospital looking sunburnt. So his symptoms were immediate right off the bat. But man, what a story. That's just crazy. And that longer one that I showed before I started the video, that one goes into a lot more detail as to what happened and everything that was involved with his situation. But yeah, that was crazy. I just felt like I should watch that and just kind of do a little commentary on it, and also show a little bit of information with regard to millisieverts and sieverts and some comparisons, just to kind of get an idea as to how much he was really exposed to compared to other levels of exposure that's out there. But I'll link that table that I had up. I'll put all that in the description, and the full video and all that good stuff that I came across. And thanks for watching. See you later.